These people always come here pretending to be sick for free handouts. Dr. Patricia Vance didn't bother looking up as Keisha Williams staggered through the emergency room doors, one hand pressed to her chest, the other reaching desperately for support. Vance stepped forward and physically blocked Keisha from approaching the triage desk. With deliberate slowness, she picked up Keisha's insurance card from the counter and dropped it into the trash bin. "Ma'am, this is a real hospital, not a charity clinic." Marcus Williams immediately stood from his chair, moving to steady his wife as she swayed dangerously. His work boots squeaked against the polished floor as he caught her elbow. "She can't breathe," he said quietly, his voice controlled but urgent. Vance rolled her eyes. "They never can. Have you ever watched someone treat your family like garbage while you're powerless to stop it?" Dr. Vance crossed her arms and looked Keisha up and down with obvious disgust. "First of all, real heart attack patients don't walk into emergency rooms. They arrive by ambulance." She turned to address the waiting room, speaking loud enough for everyone to hear. "These people think if they act dramatic enough, we'll give them whatever drugs they want." Marcus felt his wife's weight shift against him. Keisha's breathing had become shallow, rapid. Sweat soaked through her simple blue dress despite the air conditioning. "My wife needs help," Marcus said, his voice steady but firm. "She's having chest pain radiating down her left arm." Vance barely glanced at them. "Sir, I've been practicing emergency medicine for 12 years. I think I know what a heart attack looks like." She checked her Rolex Submariner. "And this isn't it." A teenage girl in the corner pulled out her phone and started recording. The notification read, "TikTok Live, 23 viewers." Within seconds, comments began flooding in. "At Heartbroken, 2024. Is she really refusing to help her?" At Justice Now, "This is discrimination live on camera." At Medical Student 2025. "Those are textbook cardiac symptoms." The digital clock above the nurse's station displayed the time in harsh red numbers, 12:03 a.m. Below it, a smaller screen showed, "Cardiology team, available." "Ma'am," Marcus tried again. She rated her pain as 9 out of 10. "She's diaphoretic and having difficulty breathing." Vance's expression hardened. "Don't try to use medical terminology with me. Google doesn't make you a doctor." She gestured dismissively toward the exit. "You have exactly 10 minutes to provide full insurance verification and a $500 deposit, or you need to find another facility." Keisha attempted to speak but could only manage short, gasping words. "Please. Can't breathe properly." "Ma'am, anxiety attacks can feel very real," Vance interrupted. "But wasting our time with theatrics takes resources away from genuine emergencies." Marcus pulled out his phone to call 911. As he dialed, the screen briefly illuminated, showing his recent contacts. Williams Medical, Board Chairman, Corporate Legal, Chief of Cardiology, Dr. Carter. The TikTok viewer count had climbed to 847 people watching live. At Save Her Life. Call 911 someone at Nurse RN 10 years. This doctor should lose her license at Anonymous Doc. Classic STEMI, presentation being ignored. Nurse Sarah Martinez approached hesitantly from behind the reception desk. "Dr. Vance, perhaps we should at least do a quick EKG. Her symptoms seem—" "Nurse Martinez," Vance cut her off sharply. "I'll decide what's medically necessary. Please focus on your assigned duties." The young nurse stepped back, but continued watching with obvious concern. Marcus noticed Keisha's lips had taken on a slightly blue tint. Her grip on his arm had weakened considerably. "She needs medical attention now," he said, his voice carrying a new edge of authority that made several people in the waiting room look up. "Sir, if you continue to be disruptive, I'll have security escort you both out of this facility," Vance replied. She picked up the desk phone. "Should I call them now?" The hospital's PA system crackled to life. "Dr. Vance to room 12. Dr. Vance to room 12. "Finally, a real patient," she muttered, then addressed Marcus and Keisha loudly. You two need to make a decision. Pay the deposit and provide insurance verification or leave. I have actual medical emergencies to attend to. As she walked away, Marcus carefully helped Keisha sit in one of the waiting room chairs. Her breathing was becoming more labored. The blue tint around her lips was spreading. The TikTok stream had reached 1,200 viewers. Comments were coming in faster than anyone could read them. At Mom of Three, this is horrifying to watch. At Cardiac Nurse Wren, she's going into cardiac distress. At Student Activist, someone please help her. Security guard James Thompson approached them, hand resting on his radio. Folks, Dr. Vance says you're causing a disturbance. I need you to either follow the registration process or exit the premises. Marcus looked around the emergency room. 3 other patients sat in the waiting area. An elderly white man with a minor cut on his hand who had arrived after them, but was already being seen by a nurse. A young white woman with what appeared to be a sprained ankle who was filling out paperwork, and a middle-aged white man reading a magazine who seemed to be waiting for someone. All of them had received immediate attention and courtesy. "Officer," Marcus said calmly, "my wife is having a medical emergency. Her symptoms are consistent with acute myocardial infarction. We're not leaving until she receives appropriate care." Thompson shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, I don't know anything about medical stuff. I just know Dr. Vance wants you to follow proper procedures or leave." The digital clock now reads 12:08 a.m. Keisha's heart attack symptoms had been present for over 15 minutes without any medical intervention. Marcus pulled out his phone again, but this time he didn't dial. Instead, he opened his camera app and began recording everything around them. The security guard, the other patients being helped, the available medical equipment just feet away. His wedding ring caught the fluorescent light as he held the phone steady. It was a simple platinum band, but if anyone looked closely, they would notice it was perfectly crafted and worth more than most people's cars. In his contacts list, if someone had looked over his shoulder, they would have seen names like Senator Williams, Dad, Federal Judge Williams, Mom and Williams Foundation, Emergency Fund. But Marcus kept the phone angled so no one could see the screen. He was documenting everything with the patience of someone who knew exactly how powerful evidence could be. The TikTok viewer count hit 2,847. The hashtag emergency room racism was starting to trend locally. "Sir, I need you to put that phone away," security guard Thompson said nervously. "This is a public space," Marcus replied quietly. "I'm documenting my wife's medical emergency for our records." Keisha's breathing became even more shallow. The blue tint around her lips was now unmistakable. The countdown had begun. Hospital Administrator Janet Morrison's heels clicked rapidly across the polished floor as she approached the growing commotion. Her perfectly pressed suit and clipboard suggested someone accustomed to controlling situations. "What seems to be the problem here?" Morrison asked, but her tone already indicated whose side she was on. Dr. Vance returned from room 12 looking annoyed. "These individuals are refusing to follow proper admission procedures. They're claiming a medical emergency, but I've assessed the situation and determined it's non-urgent." Morrison nodded without even looking at Keisha, who was now slumped in the waiting room chair, her breathing increasingly labored. "Sir, ma'am, I understand you're concerned, but we have established protocols for a reason." Marcus stood up slowly. Something in his posture had changed. The careful deference was gone, replaced by a quiet authority that made both women pause momentarily. "Your established protocols," Marcus said, his voice steady and measured, "appear to have racial disparities in their application." Morrison's smile became strained. "Sir, I assure you that's not the case. Dr. Vance treats all patients equally." The TikTok live stream exploded to 5,200 viewers. Comments were flooding in so fast they blurred together. At Doc, not McStuffins, get a lawyer at cardiac nurse _Sarah. She needs immediate EKG. At pre-med _student, this is malpractice in real time. At anonymous _MD, someone call the medical board. A second security guard, Supervisor David Ross, joined Thompson. Ross was larger, more intimidating, and clearly brought in to handle the difficult situation. "Folks, you need to either comply with hospital procedures or leave the premises immediately," Ross announced, positioning himself directly in front of Marcus. Behind them, Keisha's condition continued deteriorating. Her lips were now distinctly blue. Perspiration covered her face despite the cool air conditioning. Her left hand occasionally moved to her jaw, a classic sign of cardiac distress in women. Nurse Martinez watched from behind the reception desk, her face etched with concern. She kept glancing between Keisha and the cardiac monitor that sat unused just 10 feet away. "Dr. Vance?" Martinez called out quietly. The patient's presentation really does seem consistent with acute coronary syndrome. Perhaps we could—" "Nurse Martinez," Vance snapped. "I've already made my clinical assessment. Please return to your duties immediately." Morrison consulted her clipboard with exaggerated importance. "According to our records, you haven't provided insurance verification or the required deposit. Without these, we cannot proceed with treatment." Marcus pulled out his wallet and placed 5 crisp $100 bills on the reception counter. "There's your deposit." Morrison barely glanced at the cash. "We also need proper insurance documentation and pre-authorization for any diagnostic tests." "For an emergency cardiac evaluation?" Marcus asked, his voice carrying a new edge that made several people in the waiting room turn to listen. "Sir, if this were a true cardiac emergency, the patient would have arrived by ambulance and would be unconscious," Dr. Vance interjected. "What I see is someone who's anxious and possibly drug-seeking." The digital clock read 12:15 a.m. 23 minutes had passed since Keisha first complained of chest pain. An off-duty reporter for Channel 7 News, Jessica Carter, had been in the waiting room visiting a family member. She discreetly began recording with her professional camera, recognizing a potential story. The TikTok viewer count hit 8,900. Local news outlets were already monitoring the trending hashtag number sign ST Catherine's discrimination. Keisha attempted to stand but swayed dangerously. Marcus immediately steadied her, and for the first time, genuine fear flashed across his composed expression. "She's going into distress," he said firmly. "Someone needs to call the cardiac team now." "Sir, I am the attending physician," Dr. Vance replied coldly. "I determine when specialist consultation is necessary, and I'm telling you this is not a cardiac emergency." Ross, the security supervisor, stepped closer to Marcus. "Sir, you're becoming agitated. I need you to lower your voice and cooperate with staff, or we'll have to remove you from the hospital." Marcus looked around the emergency room. The elderly white man with the hand cut was already receiving stitches. The young woman with the ankle injury was getting x-rays. The middle-aged man was being seen by a different doctor for what appeared to be a routine medication refill. All of them had been fast-tracked through the system that was apparently too complex for his dying wife. "Officer Ross," Marcus said, reading the man's name tag. "Are you medically trained to determine whether someone is having a heart attack?" "No, sir, but I don't need to be." "Dr. Vance has made that determination." Marcus pulled out his phone and opened his camera app again. This time, he didn't try to hide what he was doing. "Sir, I told you to put that phone away," Thompson, the first security guard, said nervously. "This is a public space," Marcus replied calmly. "I'm documenting the care my wife is receiving for potential legal proceedings." Morrison's expression hardened. "Are you threatening to sue this hospital?" "I'm documenting facts," Marcus replied. "Whether those facts lead to legal action will depend on what happens in the next few minutes." The TikTok stream had reached 12,000 viewers. Comments were now being shared to other platforms. At Justice Now shared to Twitter, "Discrimination happening live at St. Catherine's Hospital." At Nurse Advocate shared to Facebook, "This woman is dying while they argue about paperwork." At Med Student Alliance shared to Instagram, "Medical racism caught on camera." Dr. Vance checked her expensive watch again. "I have actual emergencies to attend to. You have 60 seconds to make a decision. Follow our procedures or leave the premises. Keisha's breathing had become noticeably more labored. She was now exhibiting what medical professionals call air hunger, the desperate, gasping breaths of someone whose heart is failing to pump effectively. Nurse Martinez could no longer remain silent. "Dr. Vance, I really think—" "Nurse Martinez, you're overstepping your scope of practice," Vance cut her off sharply. "Return to your station immediately, or you'll be written up for insubordination." Marcus noticed something that made his jaw clench. On the wall behind the reception desk was a large monitor displaying real-time hospital capacity. It clearly showed, Cardiac Cath Lab 1, available. Cardiac Cath Lab 2, available. ICU beds, 3 available. Emergency cardiac team, on standby. Everything needed to save his wife's life was available. The only obstacle was the prejudice of the people controlling access to it. Morrison pulled out her radio. "Security to the emergency room. We need immediate assistance with a non-compliant patient." Within 2 minutes, 2 additional security guards appeared. Now 4 uniformed men surrounded Marcus and his increasingly ill wife. "Sir, ma'am, you have 30 seconds to walk out that door voluntarily, or we will escort you out," Ross announced loudly enough for the entire waiting room to hear. The TikTok viewer count hit 15,000. The hashtag #SaveKeisha was beginning to trend nationally. Jessica Carter, the off-duty reporter, was now live streaming to her own news station's Facebook page. Her professional equipment was capturing everything in high definition. Marcus looked down at Keisha. Her eyes were closing intermittently. Her skin had taken on a grayish pallor. Her breathing was becoming irregular. He knew that within minutes, this would move beyond discrimination into criminal negligent homicide. The wall clock read 12:18 a.m. They were approaching the 30-minute mark since onset of symptoms. In cardiac emergencies, every minute of delay increases the risk of permanent heart damage or death. Marcus made a decision that would change everything. He pulled out his phone one more time. But this time, instead of recording, he opened his contacts and scrolled to a number he had hoped never to use. The name on the screen read, Emergency Board Line, Williams Medical Corporation. As his finger hovered over the call button, he looked directly at Dr. Vance and Administrator Morrison. "Last chance," he said quietly. "Treat my wife or face the consequences." Morrison laughed dismissively. "Sir, your threats don't intimidate us. We've dealt with difficult patients before." Marcus pressed the call button. The phone rang once. "Williams Medical Corporation, Chairman's Emergency Line. How may I assist you, Mr. Williams?" The voice came through Marcus's phone speaker with crystal clarity. The entire emergency room fell silent. Dr. Vance's smug expression began to falter. "Elizabeth," Marcus said calmly, removing his baseball cap to reveal the confident bearing of someone accustomed to command. "This is Marcus. I'm at St. Catherine's Medical Center. I need the board of directors on a conference call. Immediately." Administrator Morrison's face went white. She fumbled for her own phone as the name Williams registered in her consciousness like a thunderclap. "Right away, sir," Elizabeth Carter, the board secretary, replied. "Connecting you to the emergency board line now." Morrison's phone began buzzing frantically in her pocket. She pulled it out with trembling hands to see Board Chairman Urgent flashing on the screen. "Oh my God," she whispered, finally understanding. Dr. Vance looked confused, glancing between Marcus and Morrison. "What's happening? Who is this person?" The TikTok livestream exploded to 22,000 viewers. Comments were flooding in faster than the screen could display them. At Breaking News Now, "Wait, is he the owner?" At Hospital Insider, "Williams Medical owns like 15 hospitals." At Legal Eagle 2024, "They are so sued." At Justice Warrior, "This is about to get crazy." A new voice came through Marcus's phone. Distinguished, authoritative, and clearly panicked. "Marcus? This is Harold Steinberg, board chairman. What's the situation at St. Catherine's?" Morrison answered her buzzing phone with a shaking hand. "Mr. Steinberg," I... we... There's been a misunderstanding. Put me on speaker, Janet, Steinberg's voice commanded through both phones simultaneously. The security guards stepped back instinctively, sensing a massive shift in power dynamics they didn't fully understand. Marcus surveyed the room with new authority. Gone was any pretense of being just another patient's husband. His voice carried the weight of someone who had been controlling this situation from the beginning. Harold, my wife Keisha is experiencing acute myocardial infarction. Your staff has refused treatment for 32 minutes despite clear cardiac symptoms and available resources. Dr. Vance's mouth fell open as the full reality hit her. Williams? Williams Medical? You're Marcus Williams, the CEO? Chairman and CEO, Marcus corrected quietly. And you've been refusing emergency cardiac care to my wife while she's having a heart attack. The blood drained from Dr. Vance's face as she realized the magnitude of what she had done. St. Catherine's Medical Center was 100% owned by Williams Medical Corporation. Marcus Williams wasn't just any CEO, he was her ultimate boss. Nurse Martinez gasped audibly from behind the reception desk. Several other staff members had gathered, drawn by the commotion, and were now witnessing their colleagues' career destruction in real time. Morrison's voice cracked as she spoke into her phone. Mr. Steinberg, Dr. Vance assessed the patient and determined, I'm looking at our real-time monitoring system right now, Janet. Steinberg's voice cut through both phones like ice. Cardiac Cath Lab 1 and 2 are both available. Our emergency cardiac team is on standby. Our ICU has 3 open beds. What exactly prevented you from treating Mrs. Williams? Silence fell over the emergency room like a heavy blanket. Marcus looked directly at Dr. Vance. Would you like to explain to the board chairman why you told my wife that these people always come here pretending to be sick for free handouts? Vance's legs appeared to give out slightly. She grabbed the reception counter for support. I didn't know. There was a misunderstanding. There was no misunderstanding, Marcus replied with deadly calm. You saw a black woman in distress and decided she wasn't worth your time. You saw my work clothes and assumed we couldn't afford treatment. You made these decisions based on your prejudices, not medical evidence. The TikTok viewer count had reached 35,000. Local news stations were now monitoring the stream, and several had dispatched crews to the hospital. At medical lawyer _JD, this is the biggest malpractice case I've ever seen live at cardiac nurse _20 years. Criminal negligence in real time at News Channel 7. Breaking. CEO's wife denied heart attack treatment at hospital reform. This will change everything. Board Chairman Steinberg's voice filled the room with authority. Dr. Vance, you have 60 seconds to provide Mrs. Williams with immediate cardiac intervention, or you will be terminated and face medical board investigation for gross negligence. Dr. Vance's hands shook as she finally approached Keisha, who was now barely conscious in the waiting room chair. For the first time, she actually looked at her patient, really looked. The cardiac symptoms were undeniable. The blue-tinged lips, the diaphoresis, the labored breathing, the pallor. Everything she had been trained to recognize as a medical emergency was right there in front of her. "Oh, God," she whispered. She's actually having a massive heart attack," Marcus finished. "Which you would have known if you had bothered to perform a basic assessment instead of making assumptions based on the color of her skin." Morrison was frantically speaking into her phone. "Mr. Steinberg, we can fix this. We'll provide immediate care and—" "Janet, you allowed racial discrimination to nearly cause a patient's death in our facility." Steinberg's voice was cold with fury. "This conversation is being recorded. Our legal team is already en route." Marcus knelt beside his wife's chair. Keisha's eyes fluttered open, and she managed a weak smile. "Is it time?" she whispered. "It's time," Marcus confirmed, squeezing her hand gently. Dr. Vance finally understood that she wasn't just losing her job. She was facing potential criminal charges for medical negligence that had nearly resulted in death. "Dr. Carter to the emergency room. Dr. Carter to emergency room stat. The PA system announced as the hospital's chief of cardiology was summoned. Security Supervisor Ross backed away from Marcus entirely. Sir, we were just following orders. You were following discriminatory orders, Marcus replied. That doesn't absolve you of responsibility. Within 90 seconds, a full cardiac team surrounded Keisha. EKG leads were attached, IV lines established, and oxygen administered. The monitor immediately showed the classic signs of ST elevation, myocardial infarction, exactly what Marcus had been telling them for over 30 minutes. STEMI confirmed, Dr. Sarah Carter announced as she took over the case. 95% occlusion of the left anterior descending artery. She needs immediate catheterization. Dr. Vance stood frozen, watching the cardiac team work with the efficiency she should have provided from the beginning. Marcus looked at her one final time. You nearly killed my wife because you couldn't see past your prejudices. But this isn't over. What happened here tonight is going to change how every hospital in our network treats patients. The TikTok stream had reached 45,000 viewers and was being shared across every social media platform. # Justice for Keisha was trending nationally. As Keisha was rushed to the cardiac catheterization lab, Marcus pulled out his phone again. This time he called a different number. Williams Medical Legal Department, emergency line. The real reckoning was just beginning. Legal Department, this is Amanda Rodriguez, Chief Counsel. Marcus's phone speaker carried the voice of Williams Medical Corporation's top attorney, who had clearly been briefed during the short ride to the cardiac unit. Amanda, I need a comprehensive legal assessment of what just occurred. We have a discrimination case that was live-streamed to 50,000 viewers and is now trending nationally. Dr. Vance stood frozen near the nurse's station, watching her career disintegrate in real time. Administrator Morrison paced frantically, still on her phone with the board chairman, her face pale with the realization of what she had enabled. Marcus, I've been monitoring the social media feeds in real time, Attorney Rodriguez replied. We're looking at potential federal civil rights violations under Section 1557 of the Affordable Care Act, medical malpractice with clear damages, corporate liability exceeding $50 million, and potential criminal negligence charges that could result in imprisonment. Board Chairman Steinberg's voice cut through Morrison's phone conversation with the precision of a corporate executioner. Janet, I need precise numbers immediately. What's our annual revenue at St. Catherine's? Morrison's voice shook as she consulted her tablet with trembling fingers. $52 million annually, sir. We serve 127,000 patients per year. Our operating margin is 18%, and our Medicare certification funding? $12 million in federal funding, sir, plus $8 million in Medicaid reimbursements. We're also a designated Level 2 trauma center, which brings in additional federal grants. Marcus pulled out a leather portfolio he had been carrying throughout the ordeal. Inside were detailed notes, timestamps, witness statements, and photographic evidence he had been meticulously documenting since arrival. Amanda, for the official record, Dr. Patricia Vance refused emergency cardiac care for 34 minutes, despite textbook STEMI presentation symptoms, including chest pain, diaphoresis, shortness of breath, and left arm numbness. Administrator Janet Morrison not only supported these discriminatory decisions but actively called security to remove a patient experiencing acute myocardial infarction from the premises. Security Supervisor Ross shifted nervously nearby, sweat beading on his forehead as he finally grasped the magnitude of what he had participated in. Dr. Vance, Marcus addressed her directly, his voice carrying the calm authority of someone who had commanded boardrooms for decades. You're terminated immediately, effective this moment. Security will escort you from the premises within 10 minutes. Your medical license will be under formal review by the State Medical Board before sunrise. Vance's professional composure completely crumbled. Mr. Williams, please. I made a mistake. I have student loans, a mortgage, 2 children. I can fix this situation. You made a conscious, deliberate decision based on racial prejudice that nearly resulted in my wife's death. Marcus replied with surgical precision. The only thing you cannot fix is the permanent cardiac damage my wife sustained during your 34-minute refusal to provide medical care. Attorney Rodriguez's voice continued through the speaker with the efficiency of someone handling a corporate crisis. Marcus, from a legal and financial perspective, we're looking at massive liability exposure. The live stream has been shared 18,000 times across all platforms in the past hour. CNN, ABC News, CBS, and NBC have already reached out for official statements. The story is trending above presidential news. Dr. Sarah Carter emerged from the cardiac catheterization lab, her surgical mask pulled down, her expression carrying the weight of difficult news. Mr. Williams, we successfully opened the blocked artery using emergency angioplasty, but the 34-minute delay caused measurable permanent damage to your wife's left ventricle function. Another 10 minutes of delay and we would have been looking at massive cardiac necrosis and potential death. The clinical words hung in the air like an indictment, each syllable representing irreversible harm that could have been prevented. Dr. Carter, in your expert medical opinion, what would have been the clinical outcome if treatment had begun immediately upon Mrs. Williams's presentation to this emergency department? Marcus asked, his tone clearly establishing this as legal testimony. With immediate intervention following standard cardiac protocols, Mrs. Williams would have experienced minimal heart muscle damage and achieved 95% recovery of cardiac function. The delay you've described has resulted in a permanent 20% reduction of left ventricular ejection fraction. Morrison dropped heavily into a chair, her hands shaking as the full legal, financial, and professional implications crashed down on her like an avalanche. Board Chairman Steinberg's authoritative voice filled the room through both phone speakers. I'm implementing immediate emergency changes across all 15 Williams Medical Corporation facilities, effective within the next 6 hours. He began reading from what was clearly a comprehensive legal document that had been prepared by corporate attorneys. Emergency Protocol, Revision 1. Any patient presenting with cardiac, respiratory, or neurological symptoms receives immediate diagnostic testing regardless of insurance status, appearance, perceived socioeconomic status, or ability to pay. Protocol Revision 2. All emergency room patient interactions will be monitored by artificial intelligence systems that track response times, treatment decisions, and outcomes by patient demographics. Any statistical disparities will trigger automatic administrative review and potential criminal investigation. Protocol Revision 3. A dedicated $50 million fund will be immediately established for cardiac care equity initiatives across all our facilities, with priority given to underserved communities. Dr. Vance finally found her voice, though it cracked with desperation and disbelief. Mr. Williams, please understand. Please. I've worked in emergency medicine for 12 years. I've personally saved hundreds of lives. This was one terrible mistake in judgment. Marcus turned to face her with the full weight of his corporate authority. Dr. Vance, this wasn't a mistake in medical judgment. A mistake is missing a diagnosis due to rare or atypical symptoms. What you did was systematically refuse to examine a patient because of her race while making racist assumptions about her character, her financial status, and her worthiness of medical care. That's not medical error. It's deliberate discrimination that constituted attempted murder through medical neglect. The TikTok live stream had reached 85,000 viewers and was climbing rapidly. News vans were filling the hospital parking lot like a media invasion. The hashtag Williams Medical Justice was trending in 15 countries and had been shared by verified accounts with millions of followers. At legalexpert_CNN:. This will set legal precedent for medical discrimination cases nationwide for decades, at HeartDoctor_MD. Every medical school in America will study this case in ethics courses at civil rights law. Federal DOJ investigation guaranteed. Criminal charges possible at Business Insider. $2.3 billion corporation facing potentially hundreds of millions in liability. Attorney Rodriguez continued her rapid legal assessment. We're implementing a complete corporate overhaul, including new hiring practices with psychological bias testing, mandatory 40-hour bias training for all clinical staff, independent patient advocacy committees, and external civil rights oversight. The total implementation cost will approach $30 million across all facilities. Morrison looked up from her phone call, her career hanging by a thread. "Mr. Williams? What about my administrative position?" Marcus consulted his detailed notes before responding. "Janet, you actively supported discriminatory medical practices, threatened a cardiac patient with forcible removal and arrest, called security to intimidate a woman having a heart attack, and consistently prioritized hospital bureaucracy over human life. You're immediately demoted to entry-level administrative clerk, your salary is reduced by 60%, and you're placed on indefinite probationary status with monthly performance reviews." "But sir, I was simply following our established procedures and protocols." "You were blindly following discriminatory procedures without exercising basic human judgment," Marcus corrected with finality. "When presented with a clear medical emergency, you chose paperwork over patient survival." Security Supervisor Ross approached with obvious hesitation. "Mr. Williams, sir, my team and I were just following direct orders from hospital administration." "Officer Ross, you and your security team participated in threatening to forcibly remove a woman experiencing a massive heart attack. You prioritized following orders over protecting a patient's life. You and your entire team are terminated immediately. Any future employment in healthcare will require completion of bias training and patient advocacy certification at your own expense." The security guards exchanged panicked looks as their careers in hospital security evaporated before their eyes. Dr. Carter pulled Marcus aside for a private consultation. "Sir, there's additional information you need to know immediately. I've reviewed our electronic medical records from the past 18 months. Dr. Vance demonstrates a clear statistical pattern of significantly longer wait times for minority patients. The average difference is 43 minutes for identical presenting symptoms." Marcus's jaw visibly tightened. 43 minutes average delay? "Yes, sir. What happened to your wife tonight wasn't an isolated incident of poor judgment. It was part of a systematic, documented pattern of racially discriminatory medical care." Board Chairman Steinberg's voice thundered through both phones. "Dr. Carter, I'm ordering an immediate comprehensive audit of patient care disparities across all 15 Williams medical facilities. I want complete statistical analysis on my desk within 72 hours. The real reckoning was just beginning. 48 hours later, the transformation of St. Catherine's Medical Center was already underway. Marcus stood in the same emergency room where his wife had nearly died, but everything had changed. Dr. Patricia Vance's medical license had been suspended pending investigation by the State Medical Board. The official complaint, filed by Williams Medical Corporation's legal team, documented a pattern of discriminatory care spanning 18 months. Her termination had become national news, featured on every major network as an example of systemic healthcare racism. The board voted unanimously, Board Chairman Steinberg reported via video conference from the corporate boardroom. Dr. Vance is permanently banned from employment at any Williams medical facility. Her discriminatory practices violated federal law, corporate policy, and basic medical ethics. Administrator Janet Morrison had been officially demoted to administrative clerk in the billing department. Her salary had been cut from $127,000 annually to $45,000. The corporate investigation revealed she had ignored previous patient complaints about discriminatory treatment, prioritizing hospital revenue over patient care. Janet's pattern of enabling discrimination made her unfit for administrative leadership, Marcus explained to the assembled staff. Leadership positions require individuals who prioritize patient welfare above all other considerations. The 4 security guards who had threatened to forcibly remove Keisha during her heart attack had been terminated immediately. Security Supervisor David Ross faced additional scrutiny when investigators discovered he had been involved in removing other minority patients from the emergency room without proper medical clearance. Our new security protocols prioritize patient protection over hospital policy enforcement, announced the new Director of Patient Safety, Dr. Michael Torres, a former civil rights attorney who specialized in healthcare discrimination. Security personnel are now trained as patient advocates first, enforcement officers second. The TikTok video that started everything had reached 2.3 million views and had been shared across every social media platform. The hashtag #KHusHeart had generated over 50,000 posts from people sharing their own experiences with medical discrimination. At Survivor Stories, same thing happened to my mother. They said her stroke symptoms were attention-seeking at med student reform. This video changed how I'll practice medicine forever. At Nurse Advocate 24. Finally, someone with power stood up to this system at Heart Patient 2024. Keisha's courage saved my life when I had chest pain last week. The systemic changes implemented across all 15 Williams medical facilities were unprecedented in scope and speed. The Universal Emergency Protocol had been activated within 72 hours. Every patient presenting with cardiac, respiratory, or neurological symptoms now received immediate diagnostic testing regardless of insurance status or appearance. The protocol was named Keisha's Standard in honor of the discrimination that had sparked the reform. We've eliminated the financial screening process for emergency cardiac care, explained Dr. Sarah Carter, who had been promoted to Chief Medical Officer for Emergency Services across all Williams facilities. No patient will ever again be asked about insurance verification while experiencing a medical emergency. The EquiCare monitoring system represented a technological revolution in bias detection. Artificial intelligence algorithms analyzed every patient interaction, tracking wait times, diagnostic decisions, and treatment outcomes by demographic categories. The system generated real-time alerts when statistical disparities emerged. The AI system has already identified 12 cases of potential bias across our network in just 48 hours, reported Chief Technology Officer David Kim. Each case triggers automatic review by our new Patient Equity Committee. Marcus had personally established the Keisha Williams Cardiac Equity Fund with an initial investment of $50 million. The fund provided free cardiac screenings, emergency treatment, and follow-up care for underserved communities across all Williams medical markets. This isn't charity, Marcus clarified during a press conference that drew national media attention. This is justice. Quality cardiac care should never depend on your ability to pay or the color of your skin. The fund had already provided free cardiac screenings to over 1,200 patients in its first week of operation. 12 people had been diagnosed with serious cardiac conditions that would have gone undetected without the program. Patient advocacy centers were established in every Williams medical emergency room, staffed 24 hours a day by trained advocates with direct authority to override administrative decisions that delayed patient care. Patient advocates have the power to authorize immediate treatment, bypass insurance verification, and escalate concerns directly to hospital administration, explained Maria Santos, the newly appointed chief patient advocate. No patient will ever again face bureaucratic barriers to emergency medical care. The transformation extended to personnel policies across the entire corporation. Mandatory bias training became a requirement for all clinical staff, with quarterly refresher courses and annual certification renewals. Staff members who failed bias assessments were required to complete additional training or face termination. We've implemented psychological bias testing as part of our hiring process, announced Human Resources Director Jennifer Walsh. Candidates who demonstrate racial, ethnic, or socioeconomic prejudices are automatically disqualified from employment. Body cameras were installed for all security personnel, with footage automatically reviewed by external civil rights organizations. The cameras had already prevented 3 incidents where security guards attempted to remove patients who later required emergency treatment. The most significant change was the establishment of independent oversight committees comprising civil rights attorneys, community leaders, and former patients. These committees had full access to hospital records and the authority to investigate discrimination complaints independently of hospital administration. External oversight ensures that internal corporate pressure never again overrides patient welfare, explained committee chairman Robert Martinez, a former federal civil rights prosecutor. We have subpoena power and direct reporting relationships with federal oversight agencies. The medical community's response had been swift and comprehensive. Medical schools nationwide began incorporating the Williams case into their curriculum as a mandatory case study in medical ethics and implicit bias recognition. Every medical student will study how racial prejudice nearly caused a preventable death, announced Dr. Patricia Williams, no relation, dean of Harvard Medical School. This case represents everything wrong with healthcare disparities and everything right about corporate accountability. Medical journals had published emergency editorials calling for industry-wide adoption of the Williams medical protocols. The New England Journal of Medicine featured Keisha's case on its cover with the headline, "When Corporate Power Serves Justice, a Model for Healthcare Equity." Congressional oversight had been triggered by national attention. The House Subcommittee on Health announced investigations into healthcare discrimination at federally funded hospitals, using the Williams case as their primary evidence. What happened at St. Catherine's represents systemic failures that exist across American healthcare, announced Congresswoman Lisa Torres during a hearing broadcast on CSPAN. This case proves that corporate accountability can drive meaningful reform. Federal agencies had taken notice. The Department of Health and Human Services announced new regulations requiring bias monitoring systems at all hospitals receiving federal funding. The Williams EquiCare system became the federal standard for bias detection technology. The financial impact on Williams Medical Corporation had been significant but sustainable. Stock prices initially dropped 12% following the discrimination revelation, but had recovered to pre-incident levels within 2 weeks, as investors recognized the long-term value of ethical healthcare practices. Ethical healthcare is profitable healthcare, Marcus explained to financial analysts during an earnings call. Our patient satisfaction scores have increased 37% across all facilities. Our staff retention rates have improved 23%. Quality healthcare builds sustainable business. The transformation of individual lives had been equally dramatic. Nurse Sarah Martinez, who had tried to advocate for Keisha during the original incident, was promoted to Director of Clinical Advocacy. Her job was to ensure that frontline medical staff could challenge discriminatory decisions without fear of retaliation. I should have done more to help Mrs. Williams that night, Martinez reflected during a staff meeting. Now my job is to make sure every nurse has the authority and support to be a patient advocate. Dr. Sarah Carter had become a national spokesperson for healthcare equity, speaking at medical conferences and congressional hearings about the importance of bias recognition in emergency medicine. Mrs. Williams' case taught us that medical expertise means nothing if it's not applied equally to every patient, Dr. Carter explained during a keynote address at the American Heart Association annual conference. The most powerful testimony came from patients whose lives had been saved by the new protocols. Within 6 weeks of implementation, the EquiCare system had identified and corrected 47 cases of potential discrimination across Williams medical facilities. The system flagged that I was waiting significantly longer than other patients with similar symptoms, reported Angela Davis, a Black woman who received prompt stroke treatment at Williams Medical Atlanta. Because of Keisha's story, I got the care that saved my life. Marcus's leadership during the crisis had transformed him from corporate CEO to civil rights advocate. He had been invited to speak at the NAACP annual convention, the American Medical Association's Ethics Summit, and had been featured on the cover of Harvard Business Review. Real leadership means using power to protect the powerless, Marcus explained during his Harvard Business School commencement address. Corporate success means nothing if it doesn't serve human dignity. But the most important transformation was personal. Keisha had made a remarkable recovery despite the permanent cardiac damage caused by the treatment delay. Her ejection fraction had improved from 60% to 75% through aggressive cardiac rehabilitation and cutting-edge medical technology. Every day I'm alive is a reminder that justice delayed doesn't have to mean justice denied, Keisha reflected during an interview with CNN. Sometimes it takes a crisis to create the change that should have existed all along. The emergency room that had nearly cost Keisha her life now served as a model for equitable healthcare delivery, hosting medical students, civil rights advocates, and healthcare administrators from around the world. 6 months later, Keisha Williams stood at the podium of the International Conference on Healthcare Equity, her voice steady and strong. The scar from her cardiac catheterization had healed, but the memory of that night remained vivid. "I didn't go to St. Catherine's Medical Center expecting to become a symbol," she began, addressing an audience of 2,000 medical professionals from 43 countries. "I went there expecting to be treated like a human being having a heart attack." The Williams Protocol had been adopted by 127 hospitals across 12 states. Medical discrimination complaints had decreased by 63% in facilities using the bias detection system. More importantly, cardiac mortality rates among minority patients had dropped by 37% in participating hospitals. Marcus had transformed Williams Medical Corporation into the gold standard for equitable health care. The company's stock price had reached record highs as ethical healthcare practices proved profitable. Patient satisfaction scores led the industry, and staff retention rates had improved dramatically. "Corporate responsibility isn't just good ethics," Marcus explained during his Harvard Business Review interview. "It's a sustainable business strategy. When you treat people with dignity, they trust you with their lives and their families." The ripple effects extended far beyond healthcare. The Keisha Williams Foundation had awarded $3.2 million in scholarships to minority medical students. 73 recipients were currently studying medicine, nursing, and healthcare administration, carrying forward the mission of equitable care. Dr. Sarah Carter had been appointed to the Federal Healthcare Equity Task Force, helping establish national standards for bias monitoring in emergency departments. Her work had influenced policy affecting over 6,000 hospitals nationwide. The most powerful legacy lived in individual stories. Maria Rodriguez, inspired by Keisha's experience, became a patient advocate after her own mother was denied pain medication during a cancer emergency. David Kim developed new AI algorithms for bias detection after witnessing discrimination as a medical student. Nurse Sarah Martinez had saved 17 patients from discriminatory treatment delays using the new advocacy protocols. Each case represented a family spared the trauma that Marcus and Keisha had endured. "Real change happens when people refuse to accept injustice as normal," Keisha concluded her speech to thunderous applause. "Sometimes the most powerful response to discrimination isn't anger, it's systematic transformation." The emergency room at St. Catherine's had become a pilgrimage site for healthcare reformers. A plaque near the entrance read, "In memory of systemic discrimination and in honor of those who fight for justice." Every patient deserves dignity. Every family deserves hope. Dr. Patricia Vance had left medicine entirely, working as a medical consultant for insurance companies. Her case remained a cautionary tale taught in medical schools worldwide. The lesson was clear: prejudice has consequences, and power can serve justice when wielded by those with moral courage. The values that emerged from that terrible night resonated beyond healthcare. Dignity over prejudice. Evidence over assumptions, justice over comfort, systematic change over individual revenge. Marcus and Keisha's marriage had grown stronger through the crisis. They had learned that love sometimes means fighting not just for each other, but for everyone who comes after. "We could have sued for millions and walked away," Marcus reflected during their final interview. "Instead, we chose to build something that would protect other families." That's what real power is for. Your voice matters. Your story creates change. Have you or someone you know experienced medical discrimination? Share your story in the comments below. Every testimony adds to the evidence that systemic change is necessary and possible. If this story moved you, subscribe to Black Tales Stories for more inspiring accounts of quiet strength overcoming injustice. Hit the notification bell to never miss stories of courage, justice, and transformation. Share this video to remind the world that healthcare is a human right, not a privilege determined by appearance or assumptions. Use the hashtag Keisha's Heart to join the movement for medical equity. Together, we can ensure that no family ever again faces the choice between fighting for dignity and fighting for life. The revolution starts with recognition. The change starts with you.